found it stuck in the door to my apartment. Need an escape from life? The Corpus Arcade may be just what you're looking for. A picture of a dark room backlit with the color washes of video games, giving silhouettes of the players filled the backgrounds of the flyer. At the bottom was a small map that gave directions to the arcade. I didn't see any on the neighbors' doors, but the hours we keep are different, so they'd probably already grabbed theirs and tossed them away. I was heading for the trash when I decided that I might give it a shot. I was a Mortal Kombat queen back in the day, and I hadn't been to a real arcade in over a decade. Worst case scenario would be that it sucked and I left. When I got settled in on the sofa, I gave the flyer a look again. The backside advertised a specific game they had. The Nightmare House was a new, highly immersive VR trek through a virtual haunted house. It asked for appointments to be set up and for players to be prepared to wear special garments provided in the arcade to allow for all of the VR attachments to be properly applied to the body for the most real playing experience possible. It included a $10 off coupon of the $20 fee. Now, I love my Mortal Kombat, but this is really intriguing. I don't have any experiences with VR. I can't afford the gadgets, so I decided that I would go ahead and give this a try. If I had to pay the $20, no way in hell. But I was willing to put up $10 for something like this. I called the number listed and made arrangements to go in that Saturday at 3 p.m. The person on the phone warned me not to have too much to drink before coming in, as the game takes a while and doesn't allow for pauses. And who knows? Might just scare the piss out of you. They chuckled at me before confirming the time and date. This sounded awesome. If it really was that long of a game, I'd be getting my money's worth. I just hoped it proved as cool as they made it sound. Like I said, I have no experience with VR, and I really hoped I wasn't just going to be stuck watching a version of a funhouse ride in a cartoon graphics for half an hour. The rest of the week passed, and on Saturday, I made sure to have just a small breakfast and a single cup of coffee so that I wouldn't embarrass myself with any uncontrollable bodily functions at the arcade. I took the flyer with me for directions and the coupon, and eventually found myself in a neighborhood I'd never been in previously. It seemed to be a couple blocks of a business district, but most of the businesses were either closed down with the windows boarded up or really odd. There was a music shop that had a few clunky-looking old-fashioned instruments in the window, a knick-knack store that certainly hadn't been dusted in months, judging from its display, and a secondhand clothes store with someone outside of it sweeping the sidewalk in an orange robe who gave me a little grin and a nod. The Corpus Arcade was unmistakable, though. The black doors had a giant white skull worked into them with a combination of paint and sculpture, and a sign above with the Corpus Arcade written in dripping red lettering. When I entered, it was pure nostalgia. All of the sounds of the games flooding over me like a familiar flannel. The glow of the games, the sounds of pinball, white water, fake gunfire, an 80s music soundtrack, and the smell of nachos and hot dogs was all a trip down memory lane. It wasn't until I'd been there for a good couple minutes that I realized the one thing that was missing: the people. It was a Saturday afternoon. The place should be flooded with kids and teens and other older geeks like me. I noticed a few skee-ball machines with tickets hanging out of them, but couldn't see where the winners were. As I wandered further in, I noticed a few doors leading off to different game sections. Still no people, though. It was rather eerie. I think it would have been more comfortable had the place not felt so alive while being so empty. If I was in complete darkness and silence, rather than being so familiar, if I was sneaking into it when it was closed perhaps, that would have been less strange. When someone tapped me on the shoulder, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I spun around to face them and found a girl dressed as some sort of goth nurse on roller skates. She was wearing a face mask and smelled like bubblegum. Hey, you must be my 3 o'clock. I'm the nurse. I run the Nightmare House. Are you ready? Yeah. I handed her a $10 bill and the flyer with a coupon on it. Great. Follow me. This game is totally new, top of the line tech. I'm going to ask you to do a few things that might sound weird, but they totally make the game awesome. She skated over to one of the doors and led me inside. We were in a small room with a chair and 2 more doors. Pointing to the side door, she said, "Okay, there are lockers in there and a gown for you to wear. We'll be putting some different things on you that allow your movements to be tracked in the game, as well as some electrodes that help make it totally more immersive." Sounds weird, right? Don't worry, it's all brand new tech. We got an early release. We're totally lucky to have gotten this machine. I'll wait for you out here. You can leave your bra and panties on if you want to, or if you're worried about it, there's an adult diaper in there too. Honestly, I've had to clean up some nasty shit, so I'd prefer it if you wore that, but it's your call. Oh, right. Almost forgot. There's a bottle of gel in there. If you could just use it like lotion and cover yourself with it, most people feel more comfortable doing it themselves. It just helps with the way the electrodes work. She gestured towards the door again, gave me a wink, and then sat down on the chair to wait for me. This was by far the weirdest thing that had happened to me in a long while, but it was getting more intriguing by the moment. I opened the door and walked into the little locker room. There was a hospital-style gown with the Arcades logo on it, an adult diaper, again, with the Arcades logo on it, which had me giggling, an open locker, and a bottle of gel along with a toilet and sink. I figured, what the hell? Made sure to use the toilet first, gelled myself up, changed into the gown and adult diaper because there was no way I wasn't going to use a black adult diaper with an arcade logo on it. It'd make for a great story. And then stuffed everything in the locker. When I was finished, I went back out to the vestibule to meet the nurse. Awesome! Looking good, she laughed. Now let's get you ready. I followed her as she skated her way into the room behind the other door. This room featured something like a chair crossed with an exosuit frame with arm and leg rests that had straps on them. Alongside of it were a lot of different pieces of equipment and wires. I would hate to be the person who had to deal with all of those wires. The nurse had me climb into the chair and set about adjusting the lengths of the arms and legs, little flaps folded out of the bottoms of the legs to support my feet. She wrapped things around me to monitor my leg movements, put gloves on my hands, and then started applying the various electrodes on me before strapping me into the chair. She did something to the back, and it raised up from the floor and had me set in a standing position. Try moving around, she instructed. So I did. The chair, or whatever it was, moved with me. It seemed that as if I was moving in the game, I could do so while not running into the walls. I was incredibly impressed. Okay, last thing we need to do is a few wires on your head and get the goggles on you. I have to put a little bit of the scoop on your head for the wires again. The gel doesn't work as well on the head. It washes out really easy. Is that cool? She asked. I nodded, and she ended up parting different sections of my hair and smoothing something cool into my scalp and then sticking what I assumed were more electrodes into those spots. Alrighty then. Just need to put the headset on and you'll be ready to go. You're going to experience darkness for a few minutes first. Just try to relax. Nothing is wrong with the game. It's just a way to let you get accustomed to the feeling of everything and for the game to get accustomed to you. Any last questions? I was going to ask her why the arcade was empty, but I didn't think that was the type of question she was talking about. I was going to ask her what she meant by the game getting accustomed to me, but I assumed it was just collecting all of the information from the pieces of equipment that were all over my body and making adjustments for that. Like I might have mentioned before, I have no clue how VR works and didn't really want to embarrass myself. Nope, I said, I think I'm good. Cool. Okay, get ready to enter the nightmare house. Your goal is to make it through alive. To get out, you have to find the door. Not just a door, but the door. You'll know you found it when you get back to reality. Have a safe trip. She gave me a wink as she slipped the headset on. It covered my eyes as well as my ears. At once, I was in complete darkness and absolute silence. I'm glad she'd warned me about that. I would have been worried after the first 30 seconds otherwise. Instead, I relaxed. I wiggled my fingers in the gloves and then moved around a little bit to get a feel for the frame I was strapped to. The seat was so soft that I barely noticed it was there helping to support me. Moving my arms and legs a bit, I found that I couldn't feel any resistance against them, and the sensation of having the frame parts next to me was fading. The cushioning on them must help with that as well. All in all, I was kind of enjoying being a floating being in a huge empty space. After a couple of minutes, lights started slowly filling the area. The sound of birds joined in with it. As the lights started to add some rather blurry scenery, I hoped that the graphics quality would improve, and I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, everything was clear. Not just well pixelated, it was completely clear. I was standing in the orchard of the house that I grew up in, and it was as perfect as I remembered it. I could even smell the mulberries and the apples. I could hear the birds. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced in a game before. It took me a minute of just looking around and taking deep breaths to come to terms with what I was seeing. Somehow, this game had replicated my old home's grounds immaculately. Perhaps there was more to the nurse's reference about the game getting to know me than I had originally thought. This was definitely the coolest thing I'd ever experienced. After I got a grip on myself, I looked closer at things. That's when I noticed the snakes. I dream about them often. Brightly colored snakes between a foot to 5 feet long. They hung from the trees, slithered in the grass, and poked their heads up from small holes in the ground. I like snakes. I really do. I've kept them as pets before. But in my dreams, the snakes all bite. I kept perfectly still while I checked to see if the terrain was the same as I was used to. Barn to the right, gravel road behind me, older barn and assorted buildings ahead to the right. Some distance straight ahead was the garage, and then the house to the left of that with the yard fenced in. I was just going to have to make a break to the house. I should be able to get there. At least this was just a game, right? I made it about 2 yards before the snakes started biting. They leapt, they flew, they swarmed at me with an air of determination and launched themselves through the air at me, latching on and not letting go. I was wrong, though. This might have just been a game, but those bites hurt. I was at a dead run towards the house, trying to pull away as many of the snakes as I could, while more kept popping out of the grass to attack me. Some fell off as I shook my arms and tried to push them away, but I still had some holding tightly with their teeth. Yanking a particularly vicious one from my hand, I realized that it hadn't given up biting me yet, and the teeth ripped a decent-sized wound into the area between my thumb and forefinger. By this time, I was screaming and swearing and trying to avoid the damn things. When I made it to the gate, it was locked. But this gate never had a lock, not a real one. The fence was taller now as well. I might have been able to climb over the old one in seconds, but it had changed. What had once been a decorative wire fence was now a 6 foot tall wrought iron fence with a huge locking mechanism. I turned around frantically and saw the door to the garage. Turning around, I ran to it and shoved it open, thankful that it wasn't locked. I got into the garage and pushed it closed behind me. I still had a number of snakes attached to me. I started grabbing them with their heads to get them to release my flesh, and one by one, I pulled them off, quickly opened up the door to throw them out, and closed it again. After the last one was gone, I leaned up against the door to catch my breath. I was panting and bleeding, and my heart was racing. This was the first part of the game. It took me a second to even remember that I was in a game. It was so like my dreams and my past that if it weren't for the fence, I would probably have convinced myself that I was dreaming. Looking around the garage, I noticed that the car wasn't there. A few tools sat on the table in the back, and there were some floorboards pried up. A face peeked up from below the floor. It was one of the dead people I'd dreamt there before, an older woman, thin, with papery skin and dull eyes. "Hello, lovey. You made it. I've been waiting for you." "Are you a quest giver or something in this game?" I asked. I wouldn't say that, but I can tell you a few things." She cocked her head to the side and a look of panic crossed her face. "Hurry, he's coming. Need to get down here with us." She gestured beneath the floor. "No time for arguing," she said, as I got ready to protest, crawling under the floor. "I'll explain. Just hurry." I ran over to where she'd been peeking up from and saw that the ground extended about 1.5 feet beneath the boards. I also noticed there were a few more dead people down there. Some were shaking in fear. One smiled and waved at me. The rest were just being dead. I dropped down to join them, and an old man moved the floorboards back in position above us. I was forced to lay down as it was too small of an area to crouch in. The lady was right beside me, and she covered my mouth with a surprisingly strong grip. "Shh! Just wait until he's gone, and then I'll tell you what I can." I started trying to fight her grasp until I heard the door slam open. Heavy footsteps rang out in the silence, and dust rained down from above. I tried to breathe as quietly as I could, as I was the only one who actually needed to breathe. I knew I couldn't afford to draw the attention of whomever this was. If the snakes hurt, what could this person do? I buried my head against the dead woman's chest, trying to cover up any noise I might make. The stomping continued, and the person seemed to be looking around for something. It checked under the table with all the tools in it, looked inside the metal cabinet with all the full-body snowsuits, and then seemed to be sniffing the air. As I currently had my face shoved into a dead woman's chest and was lying next to a number of other assorted dead people, I was pretty sure that their stench would cover up any scent I could have left behind. It wasn't as terrible as it could have been, I suppose. They seemed to have stopped decomposing early enough, but they didn't smell of roses, that's for damn sure. After throwing a few things and growling and cursing beneath his breath, the man finally left. I didn't move until the woman pulled away from me. She kept her head cocked, listening until she was sure he was gone. Very good. You wouldn't have had a chance to find the door if he'd found you too soon. I'm Matilda, at least I am now. I think in your dreams, I'm married? It doesn't matter. What's going on? I asked her. There's no way this is just a game. Everything is far too real. It's not some haunted house. It's my dreams and my nightmares. Well, yes, dear, it's a nightmare house. It changes for everyone. But there are still a few of us placed around here and there to help players figure things out a bit. You started in an unfortunate spot. I'm quite glad you made it here before that man came. That would have been game over. I guess you could have just stayed with us then. But to be honest, it gets a bit boring being dead under the floor. What do you mean game over? Wouldn't I just end up in the chair after losing? Well, no, of course not. Didn't they tell you you had to find the door? It's hard to find the door when you're dead. Those folks over there, they haven't moved? I'll proof of that. The rest of us are part of the game, but they're losers. You really don't want to try to lose, dearie. She said, you need to play the game, but you need to treat everything as if it's real. If it can hurt you in life, it can hurt you in the game. The Nightmare House takes your dreams and nightmares and then enhances them. You can't rely entirely on your memory of how things should be because the game makes changes. Take nothing for granted, look out for everything, and do your best not to get hurt or killed. You need to find the door and win the game. Through the bit of light that filtered between the doors, I could see that she was looking at me with a very sad expression on her face. How does that even work? I'm strapped in a chair in an arcade wearing a helmet. Can't I just take it off? You can try, but I've never seen anyone able to do it. Gloves won't find it. All the things you have on you are what makes this seem real. You've allowed them to hook themselves up to your nervous system and into your brain. If you experience pain or death here, your body will out there. No, you need to find the door and escape. Can you tell me where the door is? I begged her. Unfortunately, I don't know. They only let me be as part of a tutorial of sorts, I guess you could say. Every game is different, so even if I knew where it had been once, you probably wouldn't have the same place in your game. You have to find it in your own. You have to check every door. You might also want to bandage up some of those bites and find some better clothes for sneaking around in. I realized then that I was dressed in the black hospital gown. Looking closer at the dead people, I noticed they were wearing the same. I can't get to the house. The gate is locked. Do you know if there's a key? I don't know about that, but there is a tunnel from the back corner that goes to the root cellar. That should put you in the yard at least. She pointed over into the darkness towards the back of the garage beneath the floor. You can check up above to see if there's anything that can help you on your way, but I would try to be quick about it. You never know when that man will come back. I thanked her and moved a couple of the floorboards again to see what I could find in the garage. I found a heavy coat in the cabinet that I put on, a large, heavy wrench, and a somewhat rusted hatchet. The hatchet was more of a child's version, lightweight, probably wouldn't cut very deep in anything, but it was better than nothing. There was a flashlight, but it was dead, and I couldn't find any batteries. I found an old Zippo in one of the drawers that's still lit, so I stowed it in my coat pocket and crawled back under the floor. Thanks, Matilda. Wish me luck. No offense, but I'd rather not spend the rest of my life or death under the floor of the garage. Oh, you're welcome, dearie. I hope you find the door. She patted me on my cheek and gave me a smile. The other dead people, at least not the dead ones, waved me on my way, and I crawled to the back of the garage floor. The tunnel that Matilda had mentioned was about 2 feet by 2 feet and made of hard-packed earth. It sloped down rather steeply from where it started, but went in a mostly straight line toward the root cellar. With the oversized coat on, it was very cramped, and the little trickles of dirt that I knocked loose as I crawled through it were not reassuring. Several times I had to stop and catch my breath. It was completely dark once I had left the area beneath the floor, and I had no idea how far I had yet to go. Judging distance while crawling on my stomach in dirt tunnels wasn't one of the skills I had honed over the years. I thought I was doing pretty good by not just having a panic attack. The air was stale and musty. Small insects were crawling around and getting caught in my hair, and a few times I had what must have been cobwebs brush against my face. Finally, the tunnel evened out. I hoped that meant I was near the cellar. Inch by inch, I moved forward, brushing aside more webs until I reached the exit, which was boarded up. I nearly gave way to my panic until I jostled one of the boards and it pushed itself free and onto the floor ahead of me. The others came down just as easily. They must have been just used for concealment. I tried to figure out in my head where exactly in the root cellar I'd be coming out. From the faint light coming from above, I realized it must have been right beneath the stairs. I climbed out of the tunnel, brushed off my coat and hair, and pulled the lighter out of my pocket. I was still staying near the floor. The old, unused cellar was filthy, and the stairs ran up over my head. I could see more cobwebs around me and waved the hatchet to knock them free and out of my way. As I rounded the staircase, I lit the Zippo to get a better look. The light didn't extend all the way to the back of the cellar, but it showed me enough. Those weren't just cobwebs. The walls were thick with webs. In some places, they crisscrossed the room. Quite a few of them had occupants. From the furthest point on the ceiling that the light reached, I saw one spider first, about the size of my hand, then more start scurrying their way towards me. The webs started bouncing as some of the spiders that occupied them shook back and forth. Some of them even managed to hiss at me. Snakes, I could think rationally about. I liked snakes. Spiders are a definite fuck no to my brain, so I set myself swinging that hatchet and bolting up the rickety old stairs to get out of the door that lay closed around the top of the little hillock above me. I got halfway up when I almost ran into the web of a spider whose body was nearly the size of my head. Its black, chitinous outer layer shining, its legs spread out at least a foot. The only good thing about a spider that big is that I was able to bring it down without having to pay too much attention to my aim. I knocked it out of its web and onto the steps and then flung it across the back of the cellar, and I fell to my knees. I surged up after that, throwing the door above me open and jumping out of the cellar. I threw the door back closed as I watched hundreds of spiders pushing me up the steps. Throwing everything on the ground, I shook out my hair, the coat. I could feel them crawling on me wherever they were or weren't. It took me a good 5 minutes to stop trying to brush imaginary spiders off of myself. When I had finally calmed down a little bit, I put the coat back on and walked up to the door of the house. If this thing was locked, the wrench would get me in. I'd break a window if I had to. Luckily, it wasn't locked, and I made it into the laundry room of the old farmhouse. Taking Matilda's advice, I dug through the clean clothes and came up with some of my old clothes. I don't know how they fit me, but I didn't care. The highlight of the laundry room, besides not having snakes, dead people, stomping men, or spiders in it, was the discovery of my old 8-eyelet Doc Martens. I loved those boots. Dressed in somewhat more protective clothing, I left the room and entered the kitchen, where I immediately scoped around the place and grabbed a nice knife to add to my arsenal. Just in case, I opened every cupboard door, but none of them were the door. The bathroom was next, and I went straight to the linen closet, tried the door, and was disappointed, but did find some bandages and ointment. I set them on the counter and turned to the sink. As I cleaned out the wound on my hand, I looked up to the mirror. I had no face. No fucking face. I stumbled back to the bath shower door and tried to understand. There was just smooth skin where my face should have been. How could I see it, though, if I didn't have eyes? I tried putting my hands on my face. It felt completely smooth to them. But I noticed that my face didn't feel my hands. Some kind of nightmare trick, I guess. But freaky as fuck. I couldn't stand seeing that anymore, so I focused on my hand, got it taken care of, tried the sliding door to the tub and shower just in case, and got the fuck away from that mirror. I knew I had to be quiet, but I also wanted to start searching the house for the door as quickly as possible. I stalked around the first floor, which was a mostly open floor plan, silently checking the few doors I could find. Doors on the cabinets, as well as those to the rooms and closets. Finding nothing there, I started up the stairs. When I got to the top of the flight, I heard a noise from below. Looking over the edge of the rails that ran around the top of the staircase, I saw my mother. This would have been a great thing if she hadn't been staring at me with her eyes nearly bulging out of her head, wearing a crazy smile and waving a bigger knife than I had back and forth like she was using it to say hi. I just gaped at her, and she put a finger to her lips. She ran off out of my sight. So, if it didn't suck already, I had to worry about a psychotic armed version of my mother running around somewhere in the house as well. I checked the door to the cubby over the stairs, the door to my sister's room, the door to her closet, and proceeded down the hallway as quietly as I could. Each new door I pressed my ear against, checking for signs of anyone being in there. I opened them as silently as I could, holding my breath and wincing when they squeaked. The hallway didn't exist in reality, but did in the dream of this house. Only it led to another staircase at the end. There was something unnerving about it. It seemed dark, as if the light and life was being sucked out of it. I then realized it was a staircase from my dreams of my aunt's house, the one that led to the possessed floor, the one with a demon somewhere in it. The third floor was a very long hallway with so many doors, and all the while that you crossed it, the demon got stronger and stronger until you reached the next flight of stairs going up at the other end. I had always done my best in my dreams to avoid that floor. When I did have to go through it, it was at a run, as I felt the ice-cold claws snatching at my back. Now, I was going to have to go through it and check every single door. As far as traps went, the game had found a good one here. I crept as softly as I could up the stairs, leading with the knife. I could hear faint laughter coming from further down the hall. When I reached the first door, it swung open on its own. Stifling a gasp, I walked into the room. It was a parlor with a few china hutches and a seating area. I checked every damned one of those doors on the hutches as the echoing laughter started getting louder. It was high-pitched, the sound of the creepy ghost kid in a horror movie. I was the character that everybody was shouting at for being an idiot and not running the fuck away, but I didn't have that option. This floor would be a good place to hide the way out. I had to check them all. With one last look over the parlor, I went back into the hall. The next door swung open before I even got to it, slamming against the wall into the room. This room was empty, with the exception of a few pieces of furniture covered in sheets. I started peeking under each sheet, checking for anything that might have a door on it. After the chair and the ottoman, I felt an icy finger draw itself across my cheek. A voice yelled out, "Looking for something?" And all of the sheets flew into the air. There was nothing beneath them that had a door, but there was a standing, full-sized mirror. I caught my faceless reflection again, and behind me, in the doorway, was my mother standing with her knife, shushing me. I spun around, but she was gone. When I got back to the hallway, all of the doors slammed themselves open. Some of them were swinging open and closed, slamming both into the walls and shut. The child's laughter was now blaringly loud, with a deep accompaniment. My mother was nowhere to be seen. At this point, I admit, I straight up lost my nerves. I forced myself into those rooms, sometimes having to avoid getting hit by a door. All of the doors within these rooms were open as well. It was as if the demon that possessed this floor was mocking me. Whether or not the exit was here, I knew I had to try every door. I couldn't just flee from it this time. The whole floor was alive with slamming doors and the horrible cacophony of laughter. I reached the final room and walked in to see a child's bedroom. I had never entered any of the rooms from this hallway before, so I don't know whether it was always here or if it was the game. Standing behind the bed was a little girl, the source of the laughter. She looked up at me with black eyes. "Would you like to have tea with me? I know you like to play." I ran to the side of the room where her closet was and checked the door. It wasn't it. I'd done this entire floor for nothing, and now I had a possessed kid taunting me. She stomped her foot. "Look at me! Play with me! I know! Let's play dolls! Have you seen my dollhouse?" She pointed towards the corner to a huge dollhouse. It was open in half. It was 4 stories tall, and it had many, many doors. "You know you want to play." I nearly wept. "Okay, let's play dolls," I whispered. She smiled wickedly at me and handed me a doll. It looked just like me. I went over to the dollhouse and tried to start opening all of the doors that I could find in it. The little girl slapped me. That is not how we play. We have to get the dolls dressed and get ready to have a party for them in the attic. How, how about I look through the house and try to find things to take up to the attic for the party while you get the dolls dressed? At least the attic didn't seem to have more than one room, if the dollhouse was a true reflection of the house. It was also mostly bare. What if the door wasn't in the house? How fucked was I? I suppose, but you have to put the party up really nice, she said, pouting. A pouting demon-possessed child is not something you say no to. I gave her a nod and went back to checking the doors in the dollhouse, taking a few items here and there and putting them in the attic for the party. When I opened one of the doors, something pricked my thumb. I yanked it back to my mouth, and I saw the doll version of my mother, complete with a knife, hiding in one of the closets. I carefully took the doll out and saw something behind her in the closet, a large iron key. I snatched it out and stuck it in my pocket while I was turned away from the little girl, and immediately put the mother doll into the attic. Look, she's coming to the party too. Won't that be fun? I tried for cheerful. I really did. You don't know anything, do you? She'll ruin the party. You need to lock her up. She rolled her eyes at me as she finished dressing up the other dolls. Why would I lock her up? Because she always ruins things for me. She's no fun. She's mean, and she doesn't let me do anything, screamed the little girl. Maybe I'll just have her sit here on the stairs. Then she can hear the party and be sad that she can't come. How does that sound? My mind was running at 90 miles a minute, trying to figure things out. True, the version of my mother running around scared the shit out of me, but she hadn't actually hurt me, and she seemed to be able to frustrate the demon child. I had a key now. I might be wrong, but it seemed like it was possibly a way to escape from the game. I just had to make it out alive. Fine, she sighed, but she doesn't get any cake and she doesn't get to play. Okay, deal. I put the mother doll right on the staircase. I had finished opening every damned door inside of the dollhouse, and it was finally time to test my theory. I started to stand up and stretch my joints a bit. It wasn't until I turned around and started running for the door that the demon child realized what I was doing. No! The demon shed the child at that point like a second skin and charged after me as I just made it out the door. I started running up the stairs, and there was my mother, maniacal smile, knife and all. She nodded at me as I ran past her and turned to face the demon. I made it up to the attic and opened the door. It was not the one. I slammed the door shut and got to work. When I had been decorating for the party, I made sure to put certain things that I found in the dollhouse into the attic. That included all of the bed sheets I had found. It might be cliche, but the dollhouse was lacking in repelling gear. There, on the floor, were the sheets. I tied them together as fast as I could, triple-checked the room for any hidden doors in case I was wrong, and then tied one end of the sheet to a sturdy table by a window to the front of the house. There was screaming on the stairs, but it sounded as though my mother was winning. It would all be over if I could just get out of here. I opened the window, lowered my escape rope, and climbed out. I was very careful lowering myself down the side of the house. I hadn't come this far to die close enough to the garage that I'd end up spending eternity with Matilda. When I reached the ground, I ran to the gate. The key fit into the lock. I closed my eyes, said a short prayer, and then unlocked the gate. The air in the space between the fence seemed to shimmer like a road on a hot day. I stepped through the gate, and the sky began to swirl into darkness. Moments later, the VR headset was pulled from my head. Hey, welcome back. I wasn't sure if you're going to make it or not. Glad you didn't need the diaper, even if you wore it, though. I sat stunned as the nurse prattled away around me while taking all the wires and gloves off. Pretty neat game, huh? I've never been through anything like it, I told her honestly. I just wanted to get the fuck out of there and get home. I didn't even want to know the answers to the questions I had. I just wanted to go home and forget that I'd ever done this. I would never come within a mile of VR again. Here, she added something to me. All of the winners get one. I guessed your size. It was a black t-shirt with the Corpus Arcade on the back and I survived the Nightmare House on the front in the same dripping font as a sign. Thanks. I think I need to go have a nap. I took the t-shirt, got dressed, and walked out of the arcade without looking around me. I didn't want to see that there were no people that I could see. I didn't want to know why there were no people there that I could see, and I didn't want to know why. I went home. I took that nap. I stayed home the next day and watched comedies. I called my mother to tell her I loved her. Then I went back to work and never told anyone about what happened. There's one thing that's been bothering me ever since I left that place. One thing more than you'd expect anyway. Every now and then when I'm around a mirror, I'll catch a reflection out of the corner of my eye that doesn't have a face. If I look directly at it, it will clear up and I see myself just fine. But I'm scared. I don't know if it's my imagination or if it's something that I brought back with me, or if maybe I'm still in the room, strapped to that thing, and I never find the right door. I tried to find it a few times, but I never did. It wasn't listed anywhere, and none of the neighbors I checked had gotten a flyer. I thought I found the area, but it just wasn't there. I kept the t-shirt, though, and of course the diaper, to make sure that I know it really happened. And now that you've heard its story, I hope you enjoyed it more than I did.